If you have ever seen an HOA Karen push her luck too far, you are going to want to hear this one. And before we start, tell me which country you are watching my video from. Make sure to like and subscribe for more stories. The story begins in a quiet neighborhood that looked peaceful from a distance, but was held together by rules that felt more like traps than guidelines. The homeowners moved there hoping for calm weekends and predictable routines. Instead, they walked into a community shaped by one woman who believed she owned every street, every yard, and every breath taken within the HOA boundaries. Her name was Beverly, but everyone called her Karen. She held the HOA presidency as if it were a crown and approached her role with an energy that made even small inconveniences feel like crimes. For most families, Beverly's demands blended into the background. She sent notices about trash cans that stayed out too long or lawn heights that were half an inch off her expectations. People tolerated her because it was easier than confronting her. But everything changed once she turned her attention toward one particular home on the corner, a place she believed broke every rule she imagined, even those that did not exist. The homeowner, Mark, lived there with his wife, Rachel. Their house sat neatly on a slight rise overlooking the street, and they kept their lawn trimmed, their driveway clean, and their porch carefully decorated. By any reasonable standard, they were ideal neighbors. But Beverly did not see it that way. She saw something different. She disliked the confidence Rachel carried. She disliked the calm way Mark ignored her notices. Most of all, she disliked the fact that Rachel never looked worried when Beverly threatened to report violations. The tension built quietly at first. A small note pinned to their door about a garden gnome, another notice about an outdoor light that she insisted broke HOA lighting limits. None of it had any basis in the actual bylaws, but Beverly believed her word outweighed the rules. Mark shredded the notices. Rachel placed them in a drawer. Neither of them gave her the reaction she wanted, and that made her push harder. Every week, Beverly drove past their property, slowing down long enough to examine everything she could. She wrote down imaginary violations in her notebook. She measured the height of their mailbox. She stood on the sidewalk and squinted at their gutters. Her obsession grew until the line between rule enforcement and personal vendetta disappeared. And as her frustration grew, she decided that simple HOA notes were no longer enough. She needed to escalate. One morning, she spotted Rachel leaving the house with a folder in her hand and a calm expression that Beverly felt was a direct insult to her authority. Beverly convinced herself that Rachel was hiding something. She believed Rachel was defying her. She wanted to make an example out of her. She grabbed her phone, convinced the moment had come. She called 911. She told the dispatcher that Rachel was trespassing in a home that did not belong to her. She insisted that a woman was inside the property illegally. She fabricated a situation so confidently that she believed it herself. She had done it before in smaller ways, calling non-emergency lines to push her claims. But this time she used the emergency number because she wanted immediate action. She wanted Rachel removed from her own home. Within minutes, officers drove into the neighborhood. Beverly waited on her porch, pacing with self-importance. She expected panic. She expected fear. She expected a scene she could report back to the HOA board. Instead, she saw something she never imagined. When the officers arrived at the house, they stopped in front of Rachel. The shift in their posture was immediate. They recognized her, and everything about their demeanor changed. They did not approach her with suspicion or caution. They approached her with respect. Their radios quieted, their tones softened. They waited for her instructions instead of giving their own. This was the moment Beverly finally learned the truth. Rachel was not just any homeowner. She was the highest-ranking officer in the state police force. She supervised the very people Beverly thought she had summoned to do her bidding. Every 911 call in the state eventually flowed through her department. Every policy, every review, every official process passed through her hands. Beverly had not called for backup. She had called for Rachel's employees. The officers explained what had been reported. Rachel listened without anger. She understood that this was not the first time someone misused emergency services out of spite. But this case had a personal layer, and that made it serious. She looked at her home, her neatly trimmed lawn, her morning plans interrupted because a neighbor wanted to prove she had authority she did not possess. The officers turned to Beverly, who stepped back when she realized the gravity of her actions. Her confidence dissolved. Her notes slipped from her hands. Her rationalizations collapsed as she understood that her attempt to control the neighborhood had crossed a line she could never uncross. The officers questioned her, and she stumbled through explanations that made less sense with every word. The consequences of misusing 911 were not light. The consequences of doing it maliciously were far heavier. As the officers continued their work, the neighborhood began to gather in quiet clusters. People watched from driveways and porches. They had lived under Beverly's rule for years. They had endured fines, warnings, and petty harassment. Seeing her finally face accountability carried a feeling they hadn't felt in a long time: relief. In the days that followed, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Reports of Beverly's behavior stretched far beyond this incident. Complaints came forward that had been silent for years. People shared stories of intimidation, rule-bending, and targeted harassment. The board voted unanimously to remove her from her position. The HOA replaced her with someone who believed in structure without cruelty. As for the legal consequences, they arrived quietly but firmly. Beverly faced charges for misusing emergency services and making false reports. She was required to attend hearings. She was fined. She was monitored. The power she once held evaporated piece by piece. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood settled into something calmer. Mark and Rachel continued their routines. They trimmed their lawn. They placed their garden gnome back in the same spot. They lived as they had always, but the shadow of tension that once hung over the block was gone. The story traveled through the community, then the town, then the internet. It became one more example of what happens when someone pushes their authority too far and discovers that the person they tried to intimidate is the one person they never should have challenged. And to everyone watching, thank you for being here. Remember to like and subscribe for more stories like this one.